You know who just came to mind? Frank Capra. So we all know what a basic Frank Capra movie is. The little guy is beset by a larger force. He fights through it. He brings together the community, and they overpower the institution to win the day. It is always heartfelt. It is always life-affirming. It is always fun. And it is always a celebration of the human spirit. It is absolutely no wonder why this man's movies were so popular, especially through the Great Depression. Frank Capra was the son of Sicilian immigrants. He came to America when he was 5 years old, and they moved to California. He attended Caltech, where he got a degree in chemical engineering. He went to San Francisco briefly to make a short film based on a Rudyard Kipling poem. He moved back to Los Angeles. He worked briefly under the silent film comedian Harry Langdon, making a couple of his movies. And then he settled at Columbia Pictures under Harry Cohn, where he would remain for about 15 years. And it was at Columbia in 1926 where Capra made 7 movies in 1 year and got his toes wet in the world of filmmaking. And what's amazing about this early period in Capra's career is how quickly he got good at it. Capra had this way of talking about movies at the time, usually in retrospect. He got interviewed a lot when he was older. He would talk about the way they thought of movies at the time as being disposable like yesterday's newspaper. That was the analogy he would use. And so people would go see a movie, they'd enjoy it, they wouldn't enjoy it, whatever, but then they'd forget about it, and the movie would essentially be thrown out like yesterday's newspaper.
When you were working on those projects, did you have any feeling that these things were going to sustain or withstand the test of time?
No, actually, we thought they were like newspapers, you read them and throw them away. We didn't have any idea they'd have any value later on.
Does it do?
So this is both a representation of film preservation at the time. It was non-existent. And just kind of the overall ethos of especially small-scale studios. Columbia was a Skid Row studio. They didn't actually sign stars. They rented stars. They borrowed stars from other major studios. So let me talk about his early period. The late silent period and the early sound period. This is where the bulk of his films are. There's a lot from 1926 to 1934. He was working very quickly, very hard. And you see this very solid progression of this guy has talent and he's getting better and better. And his movies are getting bigger and bigger. And I think the movies to really exemplify that are, he has 3 movies about men who live dangerously. They're almost Howard Hawks films. They are Submarine, Flight, and Dirigible. They're separated by a couple of years each, but they're ultimately all just men in dangerous professions. And so Submarine is obviously about Navy men in a sub. Flight is about people who, fly in airplanes. Again, almost a Howard Hawks film. And Dirigible is about, men who fly in a dirigible. And just watching the progress of those 3, I'm always kind of struck about how it gets more refined with each one. So it's not just a narrative thing, it's a technical thing. So Submarine is the first, and it's a silent film. And It was Columbia's most expensive film at the time, and it's surprisingly competent technically. It has relatively complicated special effects, which are surprisingly convincing. You know, I don't quite feel 100% like I'm there, but for like a 1927 movie, it's pretty good. Flight, I feel like is a step back narratively, but it is a surprisingly competent technical exercise that uses a lot of real flying footage and models and stuff to convincingly display the reality. And I think part of the reason it's a narrative step backwards is because it's a very early sound film, and there's this unsurety of how to combine talkies with spectacle, and it ends up kind of prioritizing the spectacle over the talkie part. So, but it's a very minor stumble in his progression upwards. And then dirigible is everything he learned about increasing the spectacle with flight with a better handle of how to deal with talkies and character. And it's just, it's this completely rounded package of solid entertainment. And, it's good. I don't think he made a great movie until American Madness, but dirigible is like, it's very solid. And it shows this progress across these three movies: Submarine, Flight, and Dirigible, where he's just getting better technically, but he's also getting better narratively. And they had very little money to make movies. And so it was a very small operation. Once Capra was allowed to actually get onto set, Harry Cohn got out of his hair. So the relationship between Cohn and Capra was notoriously difficult, but it mostly happened in pre-production and post-production. On set, Capra was largely left alone, and this allowed him and his mechanical mind, as represented by his degree in chemical engineering, to experiment, to find things, to work with precision within the storytelling space. And even though he saw the medium as disposable for most of his career, he invested effort to get these things better and better. A lot of it had to do with his writers. His main writer for most of his career was Robert Riskin, who happened to be married to Fay Wray. And that collaboration between Capra and Riskin created some of the most enduring and endearing images and stories and characters of the 30s and early 40s. Their ability to write sympathetic, likable everymen in the face of larger forces trying to oppress them just meshed perfectly with the mood of the nation, and he ended up providing this wonderful sense of elation for 90 minutes, once a week, twice a week maybe, when people went to the movies. And he became a cultural institution. Even now, we still know what the word Capra-esque means. And it means something for a reason. Because the indelible imprint of his storytelling and of his ability with the camera and his ability with actors was so fantastic, and yet so populist in its message and intent, that it has this massively wide appeal that everyone can still love today. However, Capra's career hit a real stumbling block. He got tired of Cohn's bullshit, and he quit Columbia. He made 2 movies at Warner Brothers. He made Meet John Doe, and he made Arsenic and Old Lace. And then he went off and he formed an independent production studio. Now, this is the late 40s. This is post-World War II. The studio system is still surprisingly strong. There are cracks, but it's strong enough to be able to bat down competitors at the time. In another decade, it would have significantly more trouble, but in the late 40s, they still owned all of the major theaters in the major markets. So like New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles were all owned by MGM or Warner Brothers or Paramount. And the studios also had a system called block booking, where they would work with independent theaters to book an entire block of content, of productions from that one studio to fill out the theater over a certain period of time, which squeezed out smaller independent studios. So when Capra decides to go independent with Liberty Films in the late 40s, the first film of that being It's a Wonderful Life, it's actually not a surprise that It's a Wonderful Life was not a huge box office success. It wasn't a miserable failure, it did okay, but just imagine that movie released by MGM, where they give it star treatment in their main theaters in the main markets, and then block book it throughout the independents. That probably would have done exceptionally well. However, he went independent, he did what he could, it was a modest, sort of okay success, and then it was largely forgotten. And because of Capra's ethos about, oh, it's just yesterday's newspaper, he just kept on. And he continued on with his next movie, which was State of the Union, but in the middle of that production, he had to sell the studio. He sold it to Paramount. And that entire ordeal obviously knocked the sales out of him. He made 2 movies for Paramount right after this acquisition. They were both Bing Crosby comedies, musical comedies, and they're fine. They're entertaining, but they aren't Capra. And it's no surprise at all that suddenly finding himself at the bottom rung of another studio system, Capra just said, I don't need this, and he walked away. About a decade later, he made a couple more films, but he was just a hatchet man for 2 stars, Frank Sinatra and Glenn Ford, essentially just doing what they wanted in order to make the film happen. And then he retired completely. He lived for another 30 years. He ended up being interviewed a whole lot, especially on late night television, and which coincided very well with the reassessment and rediscovery of It's a Wonderful Life, but he never worked again. And it has always struck me as this massive short-circuiting of a career, because I really feel like it was that 30s to 40s period where Capra really got going, where he really brought everything together and started firing on all cylinders. And if he had managed to find consistent work with a producer who could back him, he would have made 10 to 15 more films, and they would have been, different degrees of just greatness. It's like no one can make perfect films forever, but I just feel like if he had that sort of backing through the 60s, about the very tail end of the studio era, I think he would have just made more and more great films. And that he didn't is, I think, one of the great tragedies of the golden age of Hollywood. The independent scene was not mature enough for him to break out. If he had done it in the 50s, if he had done it about 1955, about the time that Burt Lancaster and his independent studio was making movies, movies like Marty or Sweet Smell of Success, I think Capra would have done better, but ultimately he didn't. That's the history of Capra's career. I think it ends in small tragedy. I wish he'd worked a whole lot longer, but people don't care about the history, they care about the movies. So what is it about Frank Capra's movies that work so well? And it comes down to a handful of big and small things. He was a consummate entertainer. He wanted to make people smile. He didn't want to make people miserable, so he wanted to make fun, lighthearted movies that said something that was meaningful to him. America was a marvelous ideal in his mind, and he wanted to celebrate that. So movies like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, it can show that, oh no, there may be corruption in government, but also we can band together and make it better. And it's this wonderful, you could almost call it a mythologization of how America worked, but it's a wonderful myth to have. It's a wonderful myth to be told. It's aspirational. We should look up to it. We should enjoy it. As I referenced earlier, a lot of that has to do with just the quality of character work that he and Riskin put into all of these scripts. You take probably his most famous example, which would be George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. This is a good man, but he's beset on all sides by life and its realities. He wants to travel the world, but he has to stay in Bedford Falls. He wants to, pay for grand adventures for himself and his family, but reality keeps emptying him of funds because he's trying to help his neighbors. And when he feels like he's a complete failure of a man, when he gets to the end and desperation, and it looks like a mistake in the books is going to eliminate everything that he built, and he looks over that bridge to throw himself off, and the angel comes and invites him to reassess his life, it's wonderfully life-affirming, because no, George didn't get everything that he wanted. He got everything that he needed. And what he needed was family and community, and the ability to actually build real bonds with people. And so it's this combination of George himself is very likable. Hiring Jimmy Stewart is always going to be a good choice for bringing to life a likable character. His affable existence is just easy street towards likability. But then you have this guy who wants to do good, who does good, but then he is just beset by obstacles that he has to overcome, which prevents him from doing what he wants, and he becomes incredibly sympathetic. This is just very smart writing. And on top of it, we have him reaching a low point that he has to overcome, and we're cheering for him. It's like we've liked him. We know what he's had to overcome, and we know what he wants. We know his dreams. And then, you know what? He's suddenly looking at killing himself, and we don't want it because we like him. And that's a quality of writing, that's a quality of performance, that's a quality of filmmaking. It's a very well-made film. Most of his films are very well made, and it has to be attributed to the fact that he just kind of understood basic filmmaking language at a level that a lot of people just don't. And he was working in the populist space. He wasn't making art films. He was making movies for the masses. And, I don't want to say that Frank Capra is looked down upon by especially the industry. The industry owes a lot to him, and the industry knows it. But he feels like he's kind of off to the side a little bit. And he's like, oh, they're serious filmmakers, and then there are the populist filmmakers. And I hate that delineation. Frank Capra was a wonderful talent who I feel like was taken out of the industry too early. And my only real frustration is that most of his filmography is solidly good, but not great. And he was just hitting it on all cylinders, just too late, and he got short-circuited. So the big things are his ability with character, with structure, but there's another element that makes his movies just fun from moment to moment, and it is Capra's desire to find fun business for every actor on screen. So there's this great moment in It's a Wonderful Life where Gloria Graham is walking down the street of Bedford Falls. She is, wearing a skimpy little skirt, and she just walks down the street and she's attracting attention, and then a completely voiceless extra, an older man, just stops in the middle of the street to watch her go by, and then a car honks to move him out of the way. It's a quick moment that is over very quickly. It lasts maybe 5 seconds, but it's just this moment of joy. It feeds nothing, like from a plot perspective, but it just is this quick little fun moment. And there are other examples in other movies. I can't just talk about It's a Wonderful Life. He loved to have characters break out into song. So this happens in It Happened One Night.
As the man on the flying trapeze, he flows through the air with the greatest ease, the daring young man on the flying trapeze.
This happens in Mr. Deeds Goes to Town.
Ready?
Yeah.
Lay down upon the Swanee River, far, far away.
And it's just people suddenly stopping everything and breaking out into song. And again, what plot point does it feed? It doesn't really. If it does anything, it helps characters bond, especially in Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. But in It Happened One Night, it's just a moment of levity. That's all it is. seeing Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert just suddenly break out into song for no real reason on the bus that they're on, and why not? It's a fun moment. And so you have this combination where all of the big things are done intelligently and well in a way that mass audiences will appreciate, but then all of the little details dotted throughout the film to make scenes kind of breathe, to give them life, to give life to the world around the characters. It's all designed to make the audience entertained. So not only do we like the characters, do we like the main characters, we also enjoy the presence of everyone around them. They're fun. You know, it's like we don't want to just move to Bedford Falls because of George Bailey. We want to move to Bedford Falls because it feels like a wonderful place to live, and a lot of that is because of the characters, the minor characters dotted throughout, who were just there to have a good time. And the mention of American Madness brings to mind my grand frustration with Capra. I really like Capra. As I said, I think he was firing on all cylinders when his career got short-circuited. I only feel like he made 4 great films. Now, some of the films that I feel like are like really good are just missing a couple of things people are gonna love. Think something like Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. I love that movie. I just feel like it ends in this courtroom stuff that I don't find terribly compelling. Capra does the most with it. You know, he makes it kind of amusing, but ultimately I find most courtroom things in films to be kind of dull, and Mr. Deeds Goes to Town is no exception. However, the 4 that I feel like are great are American Madness, You Can't Take It With You, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and It's a Wonderful Life. And just to see the progress of quality over time, I hadn't seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington since high school. I remembered it surprisingly clearly. You know, it'd been something like 20 years. But I did remember it surprisingly clearly, but I was not nearly prepared for how much it would affect me. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a grand masterpiece, kind of a pinnacle of a career, and I said, there's no way that Capra is going to top this. You should be saying, David, you've seen It's a Wonderful Life 1,000 times, right? And no. Up until I went through Capra's entire filmography, I don't think I'd seen It's a Wonderful Life all the way through. I'd seen bits and pieces, I'd seen the famous bits, but ultimately I don't think I had seen it all the way through. And so I put it in and I watch it, and by the end, I am just so swept away that I see a crowning achievement greater than Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And it shocked me. And then all of a sudden, after that, is State of the Union, which is pretty good, but, you know, kind of like a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, except Mr. Smith is a magnate, and he's going to create utopia, which always strikes me as kind of weird. And then right after that, Paramount movies with Bing Crosby. And then a 10-year gap, and Hatchet Man for Frank Sinatra and Glenn Ford. And it's just, you had just reached it. You had just reached that pinnacle. And everything went wrong, and you gave up. Capra is one of those filmmakers who gave up. You know, I can think of a handful more who lived for decades later and just didn't make more movies. He gave up the process. And it's always easy, decades later, to shake your fist at a dead man and say, rub some dirt on it and go back to work to entertain me, someone who wasn't even born when you gave up. First of all, it's pointless on my part. Who cares? I was not born when he gave up. The other thing is, it shows a deep unappreciation for the work that he did. Yes, I think it's a tragedy that Capra's career was short-circuited by his early entry into the independent scene. But he made so many films that entertained me. When this box set was released, I knew I had to get it. I had seen everything in here except The Way of the Strong. I had been unable to find a copy of The Way of the Strong. And the second I got this, I threw it in. And it ended up being one of my favorite silent Capra films. So I was happy to discover another one that I hadn't been able to find before. And the legacy he left us, represented mostly by this, not entirely, is that of a populist filmmaker who deeply understood the American ethos, the American myth, the people that he was making movies for, and just the medium itself. And I can't dismiss that. Frank Capra was incredibly important to Hollywood in general. He built up Columbia into an actual studio through his hard work making movies. His peak at being overlooked for A Lady for a Day as a Best Picture winner led him to becoming a governor of the Academy, and he changed how the Academy kind of approached the entire award system. And, if you actually go through all the Best Picture winners, before Capra kind of forced a win for It Happened One Night, you could say that that first decade or so was an award for producers who bet big with large productions and won big with big box office. After that, it became movies that made a lot of money that people loved. And it's a very strong difference that gave the Academy Awards a certain aura that allowed it to become something like a leader, follower of popular opinion for decades. It took decades for Hollywood to squander that. And Capra was the one who kind of pushed the Academy in that direction. So I'm not going to say that Capra was the man who built Hollywood, but I think his career mirrors Hollywood surprisingly closely. The timelines are off, but his career kind of mirrors the golden age of Hollywood really closely. He worked really hard, making a lot of little movies in the silent period. He had some stumbles trying to figure out sound, and then he became a popular American institution on his own, and then the independent scene kind of pushed everything aside. And it's an incredible legacy. It's an incredible legacy of wonderful films. And I think that there's more to discover in his body of work than just the handful that he made towards the end of his time at Columbia. It's a lot of good stuff. People just want to watch the great stuff, but there's so much good stuff buried back there. The younger generation is quite good. Again, those 3 Men on a Mission movies are actually quite good. And it's Lady for a Day is partially forgotten. It's just, there's so much to discover. I would highly recommend just digging in and figuring it out. Because yes, It's a Wonderful Life is a masterpiece and we should all love it. But you know what? Sometimes you just need to pop in The Way of the Strong and enjoy a little silent movie. So yeah, that is Frank Capra. Love the guy. Made great movies. Merry Christmas.